Welcome back to Ethics TV. My name's Jonathan, and this is episode 37 with Frank Martela, who I will not bore with introducing and reading out his bio. You can look in the below description and see that, along with a link to his website, which contains everything from the books to the talks and all the other stuff. Thanks so much for joining. Good to see
Yeah,
you.
yeah, good to see you too, and great to be on the show.
So, what is keeping you busy nowadays? What's the most exciting thing you're working on, and what is, keeping you up at night?
I guess like I all the time have like too many projects that I'm working on different topics. So in that that sense, like depends on the day. So quite much of my work is around like well-being and trying to figure out like actually like what is well-being and what are the key components of that. That's something I've been like actually writing one article on right now. But then there was like this new book that that came out like just a few months ago, like called Stop Chasing Happiness, where I trying to outline some of the wisdom around how to approach life. And then I recently also wrote one article on like the topic of like free will and AI, trying to figure out whether the AI has already passed the threshold for free will. So those kind of like bit different topics are at least come to,
Yeah,
to my
okay.
mind.
Let's start with the last one then. I'm fascinated by that. Firstly, from a human perspective, do you believe that humans have free will?
So I guess like it depends on how we define free will, and I guess like that's the typical philosophical answer to most questions. Like let's first define the terms. And I guess like if free will means that you're somehow your mind is able to like alter the physical causation of things, that somehow the atoms are moving in a different way because of your mind. This kind of like physical free will, I wouldn't say that humans have that, or I wouldn't say that AI has that. So in that sense, I would say that there hasn't been like any evidence that we could exercise that kind of free will.
So I
But
guess
then,
you're talking on the AI side, then the free will is from a set of instructions that AI is given, whether artificial intelligence starts to make its own mind up as to what to do, like Anthropic AI most recently, when being threatened to being shut down by the engineer, the Anthropic AI suggested to the engineer, well, you could shut me down, but also I could reveal to your wife that you're having an affair based on your emails. So, and so I guess that is not within the boundaries of what the engineer was programming the AI to do. So that would be free will, right?
yeah, I guess like that's sort of like show that the AI has like such degrees of freedom that they kind of like the only way we can interpret their behavior is like to assume that they have free will. In the same sense that as regards human beings, when I try to like understand human being behavior, like any deterministic model, that's mechanistic model that okay, let's see like Newton's laws. Newton's laws don't get me too far in like predicting human behavior. It might get me like quite far if I throw a stone, on that kind of situation. Newton's laws will tell me like quite exactly where the stone will land. But as regards human behavior, I kind of like have to assume that the person has some kind of intentions that they're trying to follow and they're making choices as regards how they are pursuing those intentions or goals in a similar certain situation. And I guess like it assumes at this modern AI is also in the same situation that they do unpredictable things from the human point of view, as if they would have like goals, as if they would make choices, and as if in some situations they go in one day way, in the next situation they might go in the other way.
Mm. And so, for piecing the two things together in terms of a wonderful life and how to find a meaningful experience, do you feel that the progression in artificial intelligence is likely to help or hinder us in finding meaningful experiences in this wonderful life?
Um, of course, it's a challenging question. I guess like it has potential for both, but in a way, if we believe in the future that many of the things that we humans have been doing as work, that are going to be taken care of by the AI, and so we might be in a future where there's not like enough work for like or salaried work for many human beings, that of course like challenges some ways we have been thinking about meaningfulness, because quite many of us find meaningfulness from our work, being able to do some work and get paid for that and feeling that I'm contributing, I'm making a difference through this. But at the same time, we know that, for example, as regards chess, the game, there's like, the computers have been better than human beings for already like, a couple of decades. but still human beings still are playing chess, still finding it meaningful, still like wanting to beat each other in chess games and finding something like intrinsic value in becoming better at chess, even if they know that there's going to be these chess computers which are 10 times better than that I could ever be.
Yeah, that's I can relate
Like
to that. Yeah, I play in a band. I play guitar in a band, and I know that an AI could create better music in terms of perfection, like playing the right notes at the right time, which is
yeah, yeah.
something that we struggle with. An AI could definitely hit the right notes at the right time, but that doesn't stop me from going to band practice and enjoying that. So,
Yeah, yeah. So, but in a way, it's going to challenge our thinking about work if we end up in a situation. Of course, like right now, we don't yet know like whether how much like work AI is going to be replacing, because there, and at least like right now there hasn't been like too much statistics showing that it's actually replacing work. So it's like a thing of the future, and some say that it's going to be replacing quite much of the human labor. Some say that it's not going to be as dramatic as we think because there's going to be also generated new kind of jobs, and because of that, it's just like people shift from one occupation to other, or within their occupation to shift doing different things that they did previously. So it
yeah.
could be that it has like more minor influence than we thought, but if it would have like this major influence, that would be then like challenge our thinking about how we approach work, because then suddenly we would like need to think about how would we fill our times during the days when we don't have this work, which is like so defining element of the
Mm.
modern experience.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because that if we were faced with the question of how would we fill our time, there are a couple of deciding factors or influencing factors. One is, do we have financial freedom during that free time? And because if we don't have financial freedom, rather, if the financial freedom is removed from us and we still have all of this time, and we can't make more financial freedom from the time, then we end up in a situation where, it's very different than if we've got all of the money that we could ever spend. Having free time is a different concept, isn't it? So I wonder whether this ties back to our view of what we really need to be happy, away from the traditional concept of, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, massive house with 10 bedrooms that you don't use, five cars of which you can only drive one of at once. Maybe there's some more realistic views of what happipiness comes from.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess like when I think about happiness and where it comes from, I try to tie it like these human basic needs, try to figure out what are the kind of like the basic needs we all humans share, and what are the ways to like satisfy those. Because for example, like the connection between money and happiness, it's like there is a connection, but it's like the more you have money, the less the additional money is going to contribute to your happiness. So if you're starving and then you get a bit more money, you're going to buy food for yourself, for your kids. That's going to increase your happiness almost in all cases. But then when you have like your these basic physical needs met, then it's okay. You might spend the money on being able to connect better with the people you love. Relatedness is one of the key needs of humans. You might like spend it on being able to somehow like express yourself, do the things that you actually enjoy doing, which could be like playing football or like playing in a band or whatever. But then after that, the additional money is going. There's going to be less and less things that the additional money can buy, which can actually increase your happiness because your basic needs are already quite satisfied, or at least like the parts of the basic needs that can be satisfied by money are already relatively satisfied after a certain point.
Yeah, that's I remember in my economics studies at college, there was I think we called that the law of diminishing returns, and so
Yeah, yeah.
gradually the returns. I'm wondering whether, from a Finnish perspective, Kimi Räikkönen, the Formula One driver, became less motivated after he won the Formula One World Championships. Would you say that's one of the reasons why he just basically didn't give a damn after that?
I actually have to say that I haven't followed Formula One so well. Of course, I know Kimi Räikkönen, but like don't remember like reading so deep psychological profiles of him that I could say anything about.
Well, one thing I do notice is that in almost all sports, well, every sport I've noticed there is a law of diminishing returns where the volume of world championships has a factorially less impact. So look, you take Lewis Hamilton, who's won seven, arguably eight world championships, but the ones in contention. But his reaction after the first world championship was a whole different ball game than the seventh. You know,
Oh
the
yeah,
first one was like the world had changed, like the whole of his
yeah,
entire life's mission had realized itself. And by the seventh, it's like, here we are again, number seven.
yeah. Yeah. Of course, that's going to be true. That that you're not going to be enjoying the seventh one as much as the first one.
Yeah. And so to your thesis, would one, I don't want to be too provocative in the question because I admire your work massively, but I'm trying to see the edges of the reasoning. Would you say that from a stoic perspective, at least, or from a rational perspective, one should um, maybe not place so much importance on even the first World Championship, or at least not define our identity around the first World Championship. And a more balanced life could arguably be more meaningful if we were to step away from the transient ups and downs of the roller coaster. Would you say that's the case?
Yeah, and I would actually say that sometimes it's easier to like succeed if you're less focused on the succession itself, like or the goal itself. You're more focused on the process. So I've been like talking to a couple of people who are like professional like poker players. Like if you play poker, like Texas Hold'em or similar like poker game for a profession, then there's gonna be like these moments when you're gonna be losing, even though you made all the right choices. That
Mm,
the odds were on your side. You knew that okay, if I have this card, an opponent has that card, I have like 5 in 1 chance of winning. But then just the wrong card comes up and you lose. And they said that sometimes it can be like it can take like weeks that you have like this week of like that every day you end up with less money than you started with, and then you just have to believe in your system. That think about, did I make the right choices? Okay, yes, I made the right choices, so it's just bad luck that I keep losing. And then next week it can be the opposite, and you make the wrong choices and still end up winning money because the luck is on your side. So in a way,
mm.
when they can like analyze their playing, they have to like eliminate this component of luck and not think about the results, but only think about the process. Did I make the right choice in that moment? Would some other choice have been better? And like through that improve their gameplay.
Yeah.
But I guess like to survive in that kind of game where it's so much about luck and so there can be like these weeks of like winning, weeks of losing, which have like so much to do with luck that they have to have a certain kind of stoic attitude towards winning and losing. That they
Yeah.
have
And
to
and
focus more
and
on the process and
yeah,
like
and a
then
load of
just
money. Yeah, they need a
like,
load of money too, right? They need to have enough money to run that strategy and let the strategy play out, I guess.
yeah, of course. Like I guess, like if the money would be running out, I guess like that's in that kind of situation that the stress levels would be going up. That if
So
there's
to
like
go back to the first point on free will, then would you say that from your observation and research, would you say that the poker player who continually can look at the decisions and say, have I made the right decision? I guess that they think they're making the decision out of free will, whereas biologists would say that the decisions they're making is a combination of past trauma and genetics, and arguably the place they were born and the wealth of their family. So, like, if we look at it from a scientist's perspective, the decisions that they make in the poker game are a function of all of the things that have happened to their lives inside and out up until that point. Do you have you noticed that people have a view that they have a lot more autonomy than they have, or do you feel as if people do have more autonomy than they think? And maybe sometimes we're trapped inside prisons of trauma and say, I can't do this because I have been diagnosed with insert thing there. What do you think of that?
mm, I guess like it depends a bit on the situation. But this Keith Stanovich, who is this like cognitive scientist, he had like this book called like Robots Rebellion:
Mm.
Finding Meaning in the Age of Darwin, where he's like kind of like arguing that okay, it might be that we're quite like our choices are quite much determined by past things. That okay, our genetics are going to be have a role. Also, our past like experiences are like influencing how we react to various situations. But at the same time, we still have like this like what he calls this system two, this like ability for like conscious thinking, and that's kind of like helps us to escape these situations. Like it helps us to like realize that okay, now I have this very strong emotion, but actually the emotion is not like it not like based on the current situation, but it comes from a certain thing that I experienced in my past, which is like then out of place in current situation. So in this situation, I should ignore the emotion, still do some other thing. So the more we are become like aware of these influences of the past on us, the more we can choose when we follow them and when we are like, then just like overriding them and doing the kind of like the right thing or doing the wise thing in that kind of situation.
Yeah.
So I guess the awareness is kind of like our way of like trying to escape from the past and like the determination of the past on our behavior. And even in
Yeah.
the for example, like you might have like strong intuitions, but you still in a certain situation, and sometimes the intuitions are right, sometimes the intuitions are not right. And the more you become aware of where the intuitions come from, what they are telling you, the more you know that should you trust the intuition and go in, or when should you like actually trust the calculation and say that okay, right now I shouldn't go in.
Yeah, I get that. I am. In the past, and I don't know what the stats are now, but in the Nordic regions, there was quite a high level of suicidality. There was there in, and I don't know whether that's still the case now, but my understanding then, I used to work with a guy called Pekka Ala-Patela, who was the former president of Nokia,
Yeah.
and so I spent a long time in and out of Finland, and ironically, I then left that particular role and as an advisor there, and then became a strategic advisor to IKEA in Sweden. So I've witnessed half a decade each of the entire Finnish Swedish
Okay.
cross-cultural
Okay.
understanding. One of my favorite jokes of that is a Finnish person and a Swedish person standing opposite each other, and they're in complete silence for 1 hour, and then the Swede says, "How are you doing?" And the Finn says, "You speak too much." So, so I had a
Yeah.
wonderful time in both cultures. The link to the former depression stroke suicide rates and everything, my understanding around then was that it was something about maybe the lack of sunlight, a form of a general depression of the political structures as of the past 50 to 100 years that were kind of somehow, especially in Sweden, the socialists kind of steamrolled over, and in fact, all of their books were banned, and they were, a lot of them tried to escape the country, and Finland didn't have as great a time either, with parts of its land being stolen and so forth. So my understanding was that there was a cultural reason and an atmospheric reason to the kind of higher levels of depression. Is that an accurate interpretation, and has that changed over time?
Um, so as regards like no depression, I think like there's not very good like international comparison statistics. So
Mm,
because at one point like one point I tried to like figure out like does Finland have like higher depression rates than other countries or does it have lower rates? And it turns out if you look at one statistic you get like a certain answer, in like other statistics you get like completely different answer. So in that sense, from a scientific point of view, it seems that it's very hard for us to like evaluate which kind of countries have more depression. Of course, suicide rates are better in that sense. That they tend to be more objective. Yeah, objective, and in that sense, like easier to compare. And I don't know too much about like Swedish case, but in Finland, the suicide rates tend to be very, very high in the 1970s, 1980s, and it was like one of the highest countries in Europe and all in the world. I think Russia was even worse, and Russia still is like very, very bad in that. But but as regards Finnish suicide rates, they have like gone down quite much since the 1980s. So they're basically half of what they were then. And
wow.
and there have been like various like explanations for that. The one thing is like that probably like kind of like the healthcare system has been like become better at like taking care of these like mental issues. So it's like that there's like more services available for people. But other thing is that because the high suicide rates were driven by like men's suicide rates being high. It was not the female suicide rate, but the male suicide rate, which was very high. And there's been like quite many people kind of like trying to interpret it from the point of view that the kind of the male culture that came from like for example Finland was like in the Second World War, like Soviet Union attacked Finland, which meant that the whole generation of men were in the like front line fighting there for like several years. And that's probably something that after they came back they have like various traumas from the war, but they were like it was the 1940s. They were not like too much able to talk about that. They came back and they continued with their life, and they just like buried everything inside. So this kind of like culture of men not talking about their feelings was like strengthened by that. and it took like several generations to get rid of that. So when I look at people who are like my father's generation, the men from that generation, they're much less comfortable talking about their feelings or hugging each other or anything like that. It's like it's quite rare to see say like anybody from that generation hug like two men hugging each other. But then I think about the men who are like younger, 20 years younger than me, who are in their 20s. They're much more comfortable with their feelings, talking about them, much more comfortable with displaying emotions and so forth. So I would think that this probably has like quite a big role to play. That
Mm.
that when you're in this dark place, when you're feeling like everything's dragging you down, whether you're able at that point, to share that thought with your friend or with your wife or with your like loved ones, or whether you're like keeping it everything inside until you just cannot hold it anymore and like go to make these choices. That's probably like one of the key reasons that it has like decreased the suicide rates in Finland.
And I guess then in the flip side of that is that this is also maybe one of the reasons why Finland is so happy in relative terms now. And this obviously is a topic of one of your pieces in the past, or in fact you're seen as an expert in this particular topic. And so, would you say that the happiness is something that is relative to other places based on the progression that you've seen in healthcare and sharing of feelings, and therefore mental health? Is that one of the factors of the Finnish state of mind? And or is it also maybe a sense of opportunity that maybe the younger generation have? I'm stretching this point now just to see if there's any connection to the enablement of modern technology that could potentially give people more opportunity to be entrepreneurial. Is that linked?
Mm, so as regards like the reasons why Finland has been doing so well on this like this World Happiness Report and these other like happiness rankings of the world. I think like it's quite much like the institutional reasons that seem to be explaining it. And first of all, first of course we have to like look what is the question that is asked in these kind of surveys. And this World Happiness Report, the question is that think about your life from a scale from 0 to 10, where 0 is the worst possible life, 10 is the best possible life. Where would you put yourself on that kind of scale? So that's a question they ask from like people around the world,
Mm.
and then they calculate averages for each country. And then Finland and the other Nordic countries have all been in the top 10, for the last 10 years. So every year that it's like this year, I think it was Finland number one, Denmark number two, Iceland number three, and Sweden number four. So Nordic countries clearly do something right as regards like how to increase people's life satisfaction. And
Yeah.
then when you look into it, actually the reasons are that it's not actually about like there will be like more people who like score 10 out of 10 on this scale, but the Nordic countries are very good like like removing people from like feeling zero like or scoring 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4 on this scale. In the Finnish society it's only like 3% of the people who score below 5. So
Wow.
97 of the people are like at least halfway on the scale. And the explanation for that seem to be that it's partly about like quite well functioning like like government. We have like well functioning democratic system, free elections, free speech, low levels of corruption, and relatively effective government who is and strong rule of law, and these kind of factors. That's something that has been shown to like predict which countries are doing better on this on these rankings than others. But then it's
Yeah.
also about these like welfare benefits, that the Nordic model, this welfare model, like includes like tries to provide universal healthcare for all, tries to provide free education for everybody, tries to provide these relatively good maternity and paternity leaves and unemployment benefits and pensions and so forth. And these are also factors that seem to be helping
Mm.
people. So people feel that the government is kind of like taking care of them, and when if they're like or falling down, there's kind of somebody's got the safety net of the country is going to be
Yeah,
like
and
taking
that's
them.
and that's surely what we're meant to feel like, and that's I mean I must admit from right at the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, my experience of Finland was I couldn't believe that being British, I was traveling to this. Let's take this as 2006, 2007. Finland was the first place where Wi-Fi worked everywhere, that you could receive mobile signal underground, that the planes never were never delayed, the trains worked in any weather condition. The cars drove in any weather condition. The hotel, and I was like, and then I'd come back to London and nothing was working. And I was like, what is I my impression was that the country seems to do its fair share with the tax money. It does what you would want the country to do, the government to do, and everything just seemed to work. I couldn't believe how efficient the place was. And to be honest with you, I found pretty much the same situation in Sweden. I remember that there was a train delay in Sweden once, and the announcement came on apologizing to the entire platform that there was a 15-minute, 20-minute delay, and that they had complimentarily paid for a taxi service for everyone on the platform upstairs on the street because of the train running late. And I was like, no one in London or New York would ever do. They would never experience that. And frankly, in London, you still spend 25 minutes trying to get onto a Wi-Fi network when you checked into your hotel. And even then, it's a public Wi-Fi network that anyone else can access your passwords on. Whereas 20 years earlier, I'm in Finland and it's a secure network and I just don't understand why Finland had worked it out 2 decades before the rest of the world. That's how I found it.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, but I guess like that's also like quite many Finnish people's experience when they like, if they go on a holiday abroad, then they see all the like good sides of like, going there. Okay, of course, the weather is something that, people usually enjoy quite much if they go somewhere south from Finland. But then like if they start like then spending more time there, at one point they realize that hey, actually many things are quite like, if you need to like engage with the government, it usually things like are very slow, very bureaucratic and hard to do. For example, one friend of mine, he's been now living in Berlin for like 10 years, and he started a company there, and he said that, that he had like started a company previously in Finland, and he said that, when he started a company in Finland, complained about the bureaucracy. I have to fill in these and these papers. But then after his experience in Germany doing the same thing, he said that, that actually the Finnish process of starting a company is very streamlined, very easy compared to like what you have to do, like all the like, things that you have to do in order to do the same thing in Germany.
Yeah.
So after having like going on a holiday in Berlin, you see the good sides, but if you live there, you suddenly realize that actually there's so many things function so well in Finland that you actually don't realize it if you live here because you never see it like things not functioning, and because of that you are kind of like blind to the fact that they're working so well because you just take it for granted.
Yes, and maybe there's a learning there in terms of the relativity of your experience. And so people who, there's a lovely quote that says that a frog in a well cannot conceive of the ocean. And I love that statement because there is, 1% of stuff we know, 1% of stuff we don't know, and 98% of stuff we don't know. And it's only when you travel to places like I used to spend quite a while trying to explain to people what poverty felt like. And you can't understand poverty until you go into a slum in India. And then you get it. You can't sit. There's nothing on a movie. Nothing
Yeah,
on a
yeah.
movie set that does it until you see the diseases and then it makes sense. And we conceptualize things being, or rather we normalize tragedy or normalize any experience until we experience it. Do you, in your learnings, and what we're talking about here is the ethics of the country, the ethics of the government, the ethics of the individuals, the ethics of the businesses. From your experience traveling around, you have written and spoken about these concepts. And for the viewers and listeners of Ethics TV, what would you say as your closing remarks are the things for people to mostly remember, other than to buy your books, and your most recent one, of course, being I think the most recent one is A Wonderful Life, right? Insights on finding a meaningful experience. Is that most
No,
recent?
actually, Stop Chasing Happiness is the last one. Yeah.
Stop Chasing Happiness. Yes, A Pessimist's
Yeah.
Guide to a Good Life. So,
Yeah.
quite right, on Atlantic Books. So in closing, what would you say, other than buying Stop Chasing Happiness immediately, out now from all good book retailers, what would be your best advice for people to live a good life, even if they think that they're in a less good situation?
I guess like in this book, this Stop Chasing Happiness, one of the key messages there is like, that we kind of like should accept life as it is, no matter the conditions, because that's how life is going to be. So that's kind of like the ancient Stoic wisdom that has been like, you can find it in Stoic, but you can find it in the various wisdom traditions around the world that, the world is in a certain situation and world is going to be like, there's many things happening in the world that you cannot influence. You cannot influence, or you have like very minor influence on the world politics, or you have like very minor influence when a, pandemic hits the world or anything like that. You can do your own part, but it's gonna probably not gonna change how things are gonna like go about. And because of that, just accepting the situation as it is better than, ruminating about why isn't in some other way, because that's kind of like, you're wasting your energy on things that are not going to be like changing. So that's like one attitude that the book is kind of like, help people to build through various like point of view, various exercises. But then besides that, I'm kind of like saying that, okay, the past is something that we cannot alter. It's a certain way and we cannot like change it anymore. But the future, there's still like some way of like forming that. There's not going to be like, too much influence on that, but you can still, at least your personal situation, you can influence that. And because of that, I advocate this attitude of meliorism, which comes from these American pragmatist philosophers who talk about like meliora as a word, like Latin word means like, improvement or something becoming better. So they say that, okay, the world might not be like, that instead of being an optimist who thinks that everything is good or a pessimist who thinks that everything is going like in the wrong direction, you should be a meliorist who is thinking, what are the things I can influence and then focus your energy on that. So it can be like bigger thing, it can be smaller things, but as long as you focus your energy on those things that are in your hands, that you can influence, that's the that's where you can like create more meaningful future for yourself and for people around you, and that's where you can like find the energy to actually get something done. So like don't ruminate about the things that you cannot change, but focus on the things that are in your hands and then do your best to make those things better.
Brilliant. Well, that seems to be amazing advice. And so yes, I'll the links to everything, the frankmartella.com site is in the description below for anyone listening, watching on every platform from YouTube to Rumble to Spotify to Apple. Please do look in the description and click on the link to Frank's site and purchase what you can. And Frank, thank you so much for joining. This has been a very different episode than the last 37,
Okay.
36. And but this is there's only so much we can talk about technology innovation and the ethical practices of it until we kind of realize that it's people behind the technology that matter, and therefore inside us, how our moral principles of what's right and wrong, which make up what we class as ethics from a philosophical perspective, is what we're all talking about. And you're the first um, guest, I think, that we haven't even said too much about technology, which other than my love of Finnish technology, that's it. That's
Yeah,
okay.
but actually, at technology, I would say that that when we are building these new AI models and they have like more kind of like free will and more like degrees of freedom, we are also like passing to them our like moral principles, because when then they're building these models that they don't like for example ChatGPT, they make the first version before like it's put out in the public. They are doing like all these modifications to it that they don't want it, for example, that if you ask it, how can I build a bomb, they don't want it to give you like answer. If they if you ask like how can I best do a suicide, they don't want it to give you the best advice in that kind of situation. So they actually are already building certain moral principles into the AI. So there's the basic model. Now let's give it certain moral principles that these are the things that it's ought to not to do.
Yes.
And that's probably something that they are doing it right now already, but there's probably not too much that they do it like on a like bit by bit way. Okay, this is something that we should like ban it from doing. This is something we should not it should not be doing. But they haven't like probably thought like through like more generally from an ethical point of view how to build a whole moral system to these modern AIs, and that's
That's
something.
that is a truth. That is the truth, the truest standpoint. And if one takes law as your ethics and ignore human morality, and if you're, for
Yeah.
instance, a bunch of engineers that have never even considered the morals of what you engineer, then yeah, we are where we are. And that's a whole different conversation. I'm going to have you on again to talk about that side of things, if that's all right in the
Yeah,
future.
I think like each AI development team should have like one moral philosophers among them, to think about these moral questions and think about how to pass much moral wisdom to these AI agents as possible.
Yes, yes, please. I mean, as the chief exec of an AI-driven firm, I could not agree with you more. But I feel that there is what you and I and others are in a growing. I think we're in a growing minority thinking about these things. And this is the second Ethics TV episode I've recorded today.
Okay.
And it ended with, again, this kind of feeling of, from my perspective, that we're not alone. Anyone who's watched, I mean, Ethics now has had almost over 550,000 viewers in the last, we've only had 36, that this is our 37th episode. And I wonder whether or not the listeners and viewers of this are also tuning in because they're feeling that the topic of ethics, which includes our entire view of right and wrong, not just for us, but for society, is a growing concern. It's so timely that your book is, and your books are now talking about things that aren't a novelty. These are a fundamental part of life. And so I'm really, really glad you're out there doing it, man.
Yeah, thanks.
Cool. Well, wicked. Thank you. And I'll see you next time on Ethics TV if you can join again. And thank you everyone for listening and check out the links below. And you must buy Frank's latest book. I demand everyone to do that if you're able to. Thanks, Frank.
Out of your own free will, of course.
Yes. Cheers, mate.